All right, everybody, today is part 2 of the sew along, and so today we will be sewing the dress up from beginning to end. If you missed part 1, make sure you go check out yesterday's video. I'll link it up in the iCard up above. Go check out yesterday's video, and we go over the fabric measurements, all that good stuff in the muslin that I did for this, and then come back to part 2, which is today. Today we are sewing everything up. Now do keep in mind we are doing French seams, so I will be doing parts of the dress where you put in the ties on the side and everything. I'm doing a little differently because we are doing French seams, and also make sure that you follow along for some of the other steps, the flounce and everything that I'm doing a little differently and out of order based on the way the pattern is laid out, but it's a very easy sew. So let's jump right into part 2. And if you would just like to know my thoughts on this pattern and have a pattern review, and also how I got this look, decided to do a look for the Christmas holiday for this dress, stay tuned for the pattern review, which will be out on Wednesday, and you will see how I got this look and my thoughts on this pattern. All right, enjoy. Okay, welcome to part 2. We are going to get to sewing. Okay, let's go ahead and open up our instructions. As you can tell, it's not a lot of steps to put this beautiful dress together. However, we are going to do things a little bit out of order. I want to start with the skirt first, just because since it has that slight bias cut down here, give it at least a day to drop. So let's go ahead and put this together first. Quite easy. I'm gonna have you do things extra step in here that's not necessarily listed, but also we are doing French seams, so I will show you the first row of stitching that you will do for the French seams. But what you want to do is go ahead and grab your skirt right back and skirt left back, and then stitch those together at the center back seam. So you're grabbing your pieces 7 and 8, but you're not going to put them right sides together. You're actually going to put them wrong sides together. So a couple things that you can do. I recommend, if you don't know where your 3/8 inch mark is on your sewing machine, that you go ahead and grab you a ruler and measure from your needle 3/8 of an inch, because we are doing French seams. That is the first seam, stitch seam that you'll do. Again, these are wrong sides of the fabric together first for your French seam, and you're going to stitch 3/8 of an inch all the way down. Then we'll trim, turn it over, and then press, and then stitch at 1/4 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch. So first is 3/8, trim, and then 1/4 of an inch. So let me just stabilize this here. So again, you're just, I know where 3/8 inch is on my sewing machine, and so I am just going to go ahead and stitch 3/8 of an inch at that center back. Okay, now that you have stitched wrong sides together at 3/8 of an inch, go ahead and now cut this seam pretty much in half is what you're doing. So trying to look through the viewfinder is a challenge sometimes, but you are going to trim very close to that stitch line, because what you're going to end up doing is turning this, and I'll just clip into this far enough so you can understand what I'm saying. So once you clip into that close to the seam, what you're going to do is head over to the ironing board. What I tend to do is go ahead and iron this side first, and then I will go ahead on, make sure you have a nice good steam too. Then you're gonna put them now right sides together, right? And you'll be able to feel, and then you're gonna make sure that that's nested really well, and then press that down, and you will be able to feel in here where that seam has folded in, and then you're going to just stitch 1/4 of an inch all the way down, and then you'll have your French seam. And so once I get to that point, and that's all stitched down, I will be back. Okay, so this is what it looks like after you've done your French seam and you've turned it over. This is why you want to give it a good press after you've turned it over, before and after. Like I said, I do my press before and after. So yeah, this is now your French seam, and of course on the right side, that's how it's looking. And so yeah, that's what you want to do for your French seam. And so the next step they have you do is actually now stitch the skirt right front and skirt left front to both of the back pieces. So you're going to do the exact same thing that you just did, and go ahead and stitch your front pieces to both your back pieces, 9 and 10. The next thing I want you to do, it does not state here in the pattern, but because we are doing this first and allowing it to hang, what I want you to do is stay stitch. Do a stay stitch all along the waistband seam, this top area. And the stay stitch is, take your stitch down to about 1.5, depending on your machine. I say between 1 and 1.5, and just stitch about, I say, 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch all the way around the top. You want to keep this from stretching out or growing. Then we will go in and do the narrow hem at the front opening edges. And it says 5/8 of an inch. And again, I will show you how I plan to do that as opposed to the instructions, just to add a little bit of stabilizer here first. But first, go ahead and add your front pieces to your skirt back pieces doing the French seam, and then go ahead and stay stitch all around the waistline. Okay, now that you have all of your seams in, you can take your tape off. If you put in washi tape or some kind of sticky here just to know what piece was what, but you have all of your French seams are in, everything is looking good. Make sure you do press all of your seams towards the center back. Your back seam you can just excuse me, iron either to the left or to the right. And then, as I stated, for the top of the waist seam, go ahead and put a stay stitch. So this is about 1/4 of an inch that I did from the edge there. And so go ahead, because you want to make sure that this doesn't stretch out, because you're actually going to allow the skirt to hang just to see if anything drops. But yeah, do that stitch all the way across that waist seam, so that can be stabilized again between 1 and 1.5 stitch length. Now the instructions would have you do a narrow hem at the front opening edges on both edges. So you can, it depends on the weight of your fabric. I'm using this 100% viscose, so I'll share with you shortly what I'll do. But you have a couple options here. You do not have to do it this way as described in the instructions. You can use bias binding tape, which will be very pretty as an option. You can also do it as the instructions suggest. What I plan to do, because this is a little bit more of a lighter weight fabric, I am going to use this woven stay tape, and I'm actually going to adhere it all the way, and I'll just show you here. I am going to adhere it on the edge all the way down. That will give it an extra firmness that sometimes you can find with lighter weight fabrics like this. If you're turning in the edge, it tends to start to ripple or roll or look wavy after you've turned it over. The stay tape will allow this to become more sturdy along this edge. Then I will go ahead and turn over actually twice. here as the instructions say. I wanted to make sure that the instructions didn't mention anything else, but I will show you. I will do one side, show you how that looks. And then another option I do want to mention, you can stitch all the way down, make a line of stitching first, then press it in, and then press it in again to do your narrow hem. However you would like to do your narrow hem, do that for the front edges. You don't necessarily have to do it this way, but I will show you what it looks like after I have done it with using the woven stay tape. Okay, just so you can see what I was saying, I used the stay tape right there on the edge. Then I went and folded this in half, because this is a 1/2 inch what I used. Then I folded that in half, and then as you can see here, then I pressed it over once more to give me a nice narrow hem, and I'm going to stitch right along the edge. And so again, whatever narrow hem method that you so choose or that you like to use, go ahead and use that method. This is what I am doing. And then after that, we will be done with the skirt for now, and you can go ahead and hang it and allow it to just hang overnight. And then we will begin working on the bodice. But once I have this stitched down, I will show you what it looks like. Okay, so here is the narrow hem that I just did. Again, for me, that stay tape really helps stabilize this more drapier type fabric. So go ahead, hang this, let it hang overnight, let it get a good drop, and yeah, grab your bodice pieces and we will begin on the bodice. Okay, I now want you to go ahead and grab your bodice pieces, set those off to the side. The first piece I want you to grab is your piece number 2. Now remember, if you have enough fabric, I want you to double those pieces. If you don't have enough fabric, go ahead and stay stitch around that inner area, and then go ahead and turn under, much like a narrow hem, around the outer edge. However, if you do have enough fabric and you're able to double your flounce, this is what I want you to do. Take one set, because if you are able to double it, you would have cut out 4 pieces of piece number 2. And so what I want you to do is go ahead and grab those pattern pieces and turn them right sides together only, and stitch all the way around at the top, around the outer curve, all the way down. Do not sew this end or this end closed, and you're not sewing all the way around to turn it inside out, because you don't want all the extra bulk in there. Plus you will be able to hide that stitch line anyway, that seam with the facing pieces. But this is how it's going to look. So if you go ahead and grab, this is just a portion of it here so you can see. Let me zoom out. So once you have grabbed your pieces and you sewn them right sides together, I did a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and then I want you to go ahead and clip all around the curve, that entire curve. Go ahead and clip all the way around. And as I say, do not close either end of your piece. You want to make sure that that stays open, because what you're going to do is, after you've gone ahead and stitched all the way around 3/8 of an inch, go ahead and give it a good press, clip all the way around into the curve, and then what you're going to do is turn this right side out and then give it a really good press all the way around, and then you'll have your double-sided flounce. And then what I want you to do is go ahead and do a basting stitch, which is a longer stitch, the open end, the inner curve And then once you do that, it will look like this. So I have turned it right side out, gave it a good press, and then I basted this raw edge close. So what's going to happen is when we add all of this here, even this raw edge at the top, want to make sure this focus, this will all get caught up in the seam, so you don't have to worry about this, why we didn't close it. You don't want to close it because you don't want all that extra bulk, so leave that open. So after you've closed it and you turned everything out, go ahead and baste that raw edge together, and then you will have your double-sided flounce, and it will be all done. And so the next thing I want you to do, which I won't do on camera, is take your front bodice piece and your back bodice piece. It has you do it in separate steps, but just since you're at the sewing machine putting in darts, may as well do both pieces. Go ahead and put your darts in your front bodice piece and your darts in your back bodice piece. So go ahead and take care of the flounce, take care of your darts, and then we will be back for the next step. Okay, now that your flounce and your darts are in, go ahead and grab your front bodice piece right side up with your flounce piece, which is now double-sided, and go ahead and baste it in place as shown here. You will want to, at least I did find that it helped to clip into this curve that you basted in the previous step that we just talked about. If you clip into this, it will make it easier to lay flat up against this front side seam. And so once that is done, this is how it will look. And so your front bodice piece should look like this once it has been basted all the way. And again, because it's double-sided, you have the pretty fabric on both sides of your flounce. Go ahead and do the other side of the bodice, and then we'll come back for the next step. Okay, now grab piece number 3. So with piece number 3, it doesn't tell you here, or you might have gotten confused with the pattern piece itself, because you see here that there's a left side and then there'll be a right side. And so still cut out both pieces and then cut one of the pieces at the line here, and that will be your left side piece. So just in case anybody was confused, because you still want to mark the other piece. One piece, the left side piece, your markings here, and your right side piece will be the markings at the bottom. But you just want to make sure that you mark both pieces still with those markings, just in case anybody was confused. So I am going to go ahead and cut off one piece at this line, and then what you're going to do with those pieces is fold them in half and then stitch them from one end. If you can tell, you are stitching from this end all the way down, and then the end that's on the angle, you're going to stitch that close. So one end you will have to leave open, which is the bottom, that curved end, which is this way. This end here is the one you'll need to leave close, I'm sorry. And then this end you'll need to leave open, because in the next step what you're doing is turning it right side out and pressing. And if you have a turner, I will grab mine. Many of you will either have something like this tool, which is a loop turner, or you might have like the chopsticks or the tubes that turn your fabric in right sides out. Use whatever tool that you have. I have this tool. And then we will go ahead and turn the ties right side out and move on to the next step. But once I have mine completed, I will show you what that looks like. Okay, now that your ties are complete, we've moved from step 7 now. So because we are doing French seams for the entire dress, you will not put your tie in this way. However, if you are not doing French seams, go ahead and follow the instructions here. But what we are going to do is take our bodice piece. You need your short end first. So if you notice in the instructions here, it tells you to pin on the outside of the bodice the shorter end, which is the left. So when you clip that one end, it was the left side. So that's the left piece that now you'll need to go ahead and lay on your front bodice piece. How you're going to do that is, I have grabbed my piece here. You can't really see my markings. I put a piece of washi tape just so I knew which was the shorter piece. So I know this is the left piece. We are, and I've already shown how to do the French seam, so I won't show that again here. But what you want to do for the tie, go ahead and put the tie right side out. So you are putting the bodice pieces wrong sides together, and then lay that tie piece right at the mark. Underneath here is my marking, if you can see. And so you had a marking here also. Match those up, and you're going to sew again 3/8 of an inch for the bodice here, and this is the underarm. Go ahead and sew that at 3/8 of an inch. Trim it down, and then you'll be able to turn it right sides together, and then go ahead and sew that at 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that will catch this piece here, so you don't have to worry about that. But while you're already there, go ahead and do your shoulder seams as well. Go ahead and if you're doing French seams, this is only if you're doing French seams, go ahead and do 3/8 inch all the way across, trim, then turn everything right side out, and then everything will be caught in the top there, and which means this here will, the top of that flounce will be caught in here. It is a little bit more fabric there, but it'll be fine. Go ahead and stitch that across the top at the shoulders. Go ahead and stitch at the underarm, and then we will move to the next step. Okay, as you can tell, this is the underarm. The French seam is in place, and when you turn this right side out with your French seam, you might have a little loose thread. Yeah, you have your tie all caught in there nicely. And same thing with the shoulder. If I just show you that, here is the shoulder seam, French seam all completed. And if we just turn this bodice piece right side out, you'll see how that flounce is still caught up in the same shoulder. So yeah, and once we add the facing pieces, this will all be hidden. But yeah, it makes for a really nice clean finish. And again, if you don't want to do French seams, you do not have to. You can use your serger or bias binding if you choose. But yeah, that is where we are. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next step. So this is how your bodice is looking so far. It is coming out beautiful. Your flounces are in, all your French seams are done. So now what you want to do is your other tie piece. Take that, match your dots here, and you're just going to baste this in, because we will be moving on to the facing pieces here shortly where all of this will be hidden. But go ahead and baste your second tie piece into place, and then grab your ribbon pieces as well. 2 pieces cut out 18 inches long. Okay, per the instructions, you only need 1 piece of your ribbon. And what you're going to do is go ahead and baste 1 piece of your ribbon, and I'll show you what this looks like. But you go ahead and baste 1 piece of your ribbon here. Again, this is going to get caught up in the facing piece that you added. We will add in the next step, and so you'll go ahead and lay that there. So what this looks like is, So this is the left side when it's worn. It's right side the way you're kind of seeing it in the camera. But I had some of this, I believe this is twill tape. I've had this in my stash for some time, but I just use this. So use ribbon or whatever that you have and twill tape, and go ahead and baste it right at those marks in between the circles, and you're just basting that piece into place. That's it. That's for one piece of the ribbon. So go ahead and do that. And then what we're going to do now is grab our facing pieces. And as you know, we have completed the interfacing parts of this. What we're going to do now is just join them at the shoulder seams. And it does, you know, say that you can stitch around the edge. You will not have to do that, because if you followed how I interface the pieces together, all of that will be a clean edge. So let me go ahead and pin the pieces together so you can see what I'm saying. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you combine your back facing with your front facing pieces. And like I say, because if you did the fusing like I did, this outside part will be completely finished off nicely. And so this is the edge that we will now attach to the bodice that will cover all of the flounce piecing, the raw edges, and you have your markings and everything. Go ahead and pin all the way around the bodice, and then we will stitch around, and I will show you what that looks like as soon as I'm done. Okay, I want to point out, as you are pinning your facing right sides together to your bodice piece, make sure your ribbon is not caught up in there. It should be sandwiched in between. That is how it's supposed to be. Make sure your notches, especially your shoulder seams, are matching. Now, I have experienced in the past, and you may experience, oh, these shoulder seams don't meet up. I have more fabric in the bodice or something like that. What you can do is go ahead and unpick this seam and make that just a little bit longer so the fabric can meet, but you shouldn't have any problem. But if you do, that is a tip that I have done before that I found, for whatever reason, maybe I cut something wonky or something like that, and between my shoulder seams in my bodice piece, there was more of the bodice than this here back facing piece. So I just unpicked these seams here at the shoulders, made them smaller so that everything can meet and still finish nicely on the end. So yeah, and now we're going to go ahead and stitch all the way around, and then it calls for you just to turn it in. It doesn't say anything about tacking down, which I found interesting. So we are going to actually tack everything down after we've pressed. We do want to also, let me just point this out to you. It is in the instructions as well, is understitch the facing. And so you do want, before you turn the facing towards the inside, go ahead and understitch that facing piece, and that's just preventing the actual facing piece from rolling out. I'll show you what that looks like once I get to that step. Okay, for the understitching, so now that you have your facing piece stitched on, for your understitching, see how I just turned that? What I would suggest first is go ahead and iron the facing to the seam towards the facing, and then when you flip it over, it's nice and flat so you don't have any bulges or anything like that. And what you're going to do, see if I can show you here, I'm just gonna put it right here so you can see what I'm saying. So when you're understitching, you're just, that as you can tell, the seam is turned up, you're catching that right along this edge. Now if you have an edge foot or something like that, go ahead and use it. For me, I just tend to use my regular foot, and there's an opening here. I just line up the edge just like that, and you can see my needle is here, and I will edge stitch all the way around, And then I'm going to turn in and press it really well. It doesn't say anything about anchoring the shoulder seams or anything in place. I probably will. I'll try it on first and wear it just to see. You could do it now or later. It all depends on your fabric. But if I feel like it will roll out, I will come back in and just hand tack the shoulder seams in place just so it doesn't move. But go ahead, press this seam towards the facing like that, and then once you flip it over, go ahead and do your edge stitch, and then press it in, and I'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, we are getting to the end. So after you've pressed in, and I want to show you my bodice piece once we go over this next step. The next step, step number 17, will have you go ahead and do a narrow hem once again on the sleeve. So what I showed you that I did earlier for my narrow hem with adding the stay tape, I'm going to do the exact same thing for my sleeve. And then, because our skirt is already done, we will be combining the bodice to the skirt, and then we will be adding that last piece of ribbon. So let me show you what my bodice and my skirt is looking like. Okay, here's the bodice. And as you can tell, I do highly recommend pressing this over your sewing ham if you have one, or roll up a towel, and just to make sure you get the curves really nice. I'm thinking I'll put it on, but I may come back in at the shoulder seam and just tack that down. Yeah, because I don't want it, you know, flopping around in there. So this is where we are with the bodice. As you can tell, we are in the final stages. Our skirt, which we completed first, has hung overnight, has not dropped by much. So what I am going to do is go ahead, as I just stated, and do my sleeves the same way I did the skirt piece. Remember, for the skirt I used this stay tape to really stabilize that side of the edge of the fabric, and turned it in twice to do my my narrow hem, I should say. I will do the exact same thing for the sleeve. And then once you have that done, your sleeve is complete, we are now going to put our bodice and our skirt together, right sides together. Okay, my bodice is now attached to my skirt. A couple things I want to point out. If at any point during putting your pieces together you have your bodice hanging, don't let it hang if it's not attached to the skirt. Lay it flat. Lesson learned. I accidentally had the bodice hanging, not for long, but long enough where this did stretch out. It got a little wavy. So if that happens to you, and what I have done, just go ahead and put some gathering stitches in, and just gather in where there's more fabric, so it meets all your side seams and everything meet up, because you do want your side seams here to meet up like they are, like it's showing here. So if that happens, easy fix. Second thing, I did not French seam the waist seam, only because of this area here, where all of this facing is, and you need to turn this in. I thought that it may be too much bulk there, and so I opted not to French seam the waistline, and I did go ahead and serge it. So that's the only thing you can, but I didn't want to have any issues with that. Plus I had the issue with at least for me, my bodice had gotten stretched out a little bit. So yeah, so what we're going to do now, the next step is, now you had this piece that was extra on the facing, you're turning that in and you're supposed to slip stitch. However, let me see if I can get this to focus. Okay, so what I am going to do is stitch in the ditch on this side to catch this. That will at least help keep the facing piece down, but I still may tack at the shoulders. We'll see. So go ahead and do that on this side. Grab your other ribbon as well. You will notice the very last step as you add that ribbon. What you're going to do is turn one end of the ribbon, press one end of the ribbon to the inside. And then on the inside of the dress, you're going to pin the pressed end of the ribbon to the right bodice side seam. So that's the right side when it's put on. And then sew it into place, keeping it free. And then it says to cut the ends of the ribbon of the ties diagonally. You also can use fray check if you're using a ribbon that looks like it'll fray. I will be using fray check on the end of my ribbon just so I don't have that issue. But so the right side on the inside of the bodice is where you're going to put the ribbon. And once that is attached, I will show you what that looks like. And finally, last but not least, if you have not finished your hem, again, you're kind of doing that same narrow hem. It says you may need to gather in a little bit. What I am going to do is just make sure everything is even again. Clip off. You saw in the earlier clip, I had very little that had grown on me from allowing it to hang. So I am just going to measure from the waist seam all the way down, make sure it's even all the way around, trim. And I am going to do the exact same thing I did before with the stay tape, and just put the stay tape at the bottom, turn in twice and stitch around, and our dress will be complete. Once my dress is complete, I will show you the finishing touches, and that will be the end of the sew along. Okay, so that is the sew along. That is the dress. I have the dress on. I will shortly go into clips in a short video of how this looks completely on me. But as I said, I finished all of the seams, the rolled hem, the narrow hem on the sleeve and the bottom of the dress exactly the same. As you saw, I didn't have to trim a lot off after the skirt piece had dropped, so that worked out perfectly. So yes, I am very happy with how it turned out. Of course, you will see more pictures and you'll see the video here shortly. But yeah, thank you so much for joining in on the sew along. If there's any other sew along you would like to see or any requests, definitely let me know. Let me know what you thought about this sew along. Any feedback or whatnot that you might have, please list that down in the comment section down below. I would greatly appreciate it. So yeah, that is it. Enjoy the short video here and a few little pictures. And again, tune in for Wednesday for the full review of this pattern. Bye.